The winter morning in Florence, 1513, found Niccolo Machiavelli in his small farmhouse, banished from the city he had served for 14 years. Stripped of position, tortured on the rack for a crime he didn't commit, he had every reason to collapse into bitterness and despair. Yet in this moment of absolute devastation, he discovered something that would echo through centuries. The man who learns to destroy his own weakness becomes impervious to the weapons others use against him. Most people spend their lives as hostages to their emotions, prisoners to what others think, slaves to circumstances beyond their control. They wake each day and immediately check their chains, the approval they need, the validation they crave, the security they cannot live without. These invisible bonds determine every decision, every word, every action. They are free men and women who have voluntarily walked into cages of their own construction. Machiavelli understood something profound in his exile. The world had taken everything from him: his position, his reputation, his livelihood, his dignity. But there remained one thing no torture, no exile, no loss could touch: his ability to choose his response. In that untouchable space between stimulus and reaction lived absolute freedom. The question wasn't whether life would strike him down, it was whether he would remain standing when it did. This is not a philosophy of callousness or sociopathy. This is not about becoming cold or unfeeling. This is about understanding that your emotional reactions are not facts but choices. And like all choices, they can be controlled, refined, and weaponized for your benefit rather than your destruction. The art of not caring is not the absence of emotion, it is the mastery of it. Consider the nature of human suffering. A man loses his job and believes he is destroyed. Another man loses the same job and sees opportunity. The external circumstance is identical. The internal response creates two entirely different realities. The first man has made himself vulnerable to forces beyond his control. The second has recognized that his value, his capability, his future exist independent of any single employer's decision. One is a victim, the other is free. The weak self is that part of you that needs constant validation, that crumbles when criticized, that cannot bear uncertainty, that must be liked and approved and accepted. It is the self that was constructed through childhood wounds, social conditioning, and the desperate need to belong. It is not your true self. It is a protective shell that has become a prison, and like all prisons, it must be destroyed from within. Every day presents 1,000 opportunities for emotional bondage. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and rage floods your system. A colleague takes credit for your work, and resentment poisons your thoughts. A romantic interest doesn't text back, and anxiety devours your peace. In each case, you have given your emotional state, your inner kingdom, over to external forces. You have made yourself a beggar, dependent on the charity of circumstances and other people's actions for your well-being. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that it is better to be feared than loved if one cannot be both. This wasn't cynicism, it was clarity. Love, in the political sense he described, was contingent, emotional, unstable. Fear, rooted in consistent consequences, was reliable. He understood that building your position on the shifting sands of others' affection was strategic suicide. The same principle applies to your internal world. Building your peace on whether others approve of you is psychological suicide. The path to emotional control begins with a brutal audit of your dependencies. What do you need to feel okay? Not want, need. If the answer includes anything outside your direct control, you have identified a vulnerability. If you need your partner's affection to feel worthwhile, you are vulnerable. If you need your job to feel secure, you are vulnerable. If you need others' approval to feel confident, you are vulnerable. These needs are holes in your armor through which life will repeatedly stab you. There was a trader on Wall Street who had built a reputation as unshakable. While others panicked during market crashes, he remained calm. While competitors celebrated victories, he showed no elation. People assumed he was naturally cold, perhaps even lacking in emotion. The truth was different. Early in his career, he had lost everything in a single trade. Not just money, but his confidence, his sleep, his health. The pain had been so intense that he made a decision. He would never again give the market the power to determine his emotional state. He spent years training himself to separate his self-worth from his results, his peace from his performance. He felt emotions, certainly, but he had built a space between the feeling and his identity. The market could take his money, but it could never again take his equilibrium. He had destroyed the weak self that needed winning to feel worthy. This destruction is not comfortable. The weak self will fight for survival with every weapon in its arsenal. It will tell you that not caring what others think makes you a monster. It will convince you that emotional detachment is the same as not loving. It will make you feel guilty for setting boundaries, selfish for protecting your peace, cold for refusing to be manipulated by others' emotional displays. These are the death throes of a parasitic identity that has survived by keeping you dependent. The art of not caring requires distinguishing between things that matter and things that don't. Stoic philosophy, which influenced Machiavelli's thinking, divided the world into two categories: things within your control and things outside it. Within your control, your thoughts, your responses, your actions, your character. Outside your control, other people's opinions, external events, outcomes, what has already happened. Peace comes from investing your emotional energy exclusively in the first category. A woman received a devastating performance review at work. Her manager criticized her work ethic, her intelligence, her potential. For 3 days, she didn't sleep. She replayed every word, dissected every criticism, imagined her career crumbling. Then, something shifted. She asked herself a single question: is any of this criticism true? She examined each point honestly. Some criticisms had validity. She could improve her punctuality, her communication. But the attacks on her intelligence and potential, those said more about her manager's insecurity than her ability. She separated the useful feedback from the emotional manipulation. She destroyed the part of herself that needed her manager's approval to feel competent. She took what was useful, discarded what wasn't, and moved forward. 6 months later, she had a new job with a significant raise. The manager who had tried to destroy her confidence had unwittingly forced her to build something stronger: self-validation. The man who destroys his weak self understands that most of what people say and do has nothing to do with him. That angry email from a client, it's about their stress, their fear, their inadequacy. That criticism from a family member, it's about their unfulfilled dreams, their regrets, their need for control. That rejection from a potential partner, it's about their preferences, their history, their current capacity, none of which are judgments of your value. When you understand that everyone is primarily concerned with their own internal drama, you stop taking their external expressions personally. This realization is simultaneously humbling and liberating. Humbling because you're not as important to others' thoughts as you imagined. Liberating because their thoughts about you are not as important as you feared. The spotlight you believe is constantly on you exists only in your mind. Most people are too consumed with their own insecurities to spend significant time judging yours. Machiavelli observed that men are generally ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, and covetous. This wasn't pessimism. It was data. He had spent his career watching princes who built their power on others' loyalty get betrayed the moment circumstances changed. The lesson isn't to hate humanity. It's to stop being surprised when people act according to their nature rather than your hopes. Expect nothing from others and you will never be disappointed. Expect the best from yourself and you will never be defeated. The second part of this transformation requires building new foundations. Destroying the weak self creates a vacuum that must be filled with something stronger. Nature abhors a vacuum, and psychology does too. If you merely remove your dependencies without replacing them with genuine strength, you will either revert to old patterns or develop new, equally destructive ones. The foundation of emotional invincibility is self-sufficiency, not the impossible standard of needing no one, but the realistic capability of being complete within yourself. You can enjoy relationships without needing them to define you. You can appreciate success without requiring it to validate you. You can experience loss without having it destroy you. This self-sufficiency comes from knowing who you are, independent of circumstances, achievements, or others' perceptions. There was a CEO who built $1 billion company. For 20 years, his identity was completely merged with his business. He was his company. His company was him. When he finally sold it, the money meant nothing compared to the existential crisis that followed. Who was he without his title? What was he without his company? He had destroyed external competitors but never confronted his internal dependence. His weak self had never been eliminated, it had merely been fed and satisfied. When that food source disappeared, he discovered he had built an empire on sand. Contrast this with another entrepreneur who also sold her company for a substantial sum. She had spent years before the sale cultivating interests, relationships, and self-knowledge independent of her business identity. She had asked herself regularly, if I lost everything tomorrow, who would I be? She had built her identity on her character, her integrity, her curiosity, her capacity for growth, rather than her accomplishments. When she sold the company, it was merely a change in activity, not a change in self. She remained whole because she had never made herself contingent on external validation. Self-sufficiency emerges from competence. Emotional control is easier when you know you can handle whatever comes. If you can lose your job and find another, losing your job isn't catastrophic. If you can end a relationship and rebuild your life, the relationship doesn't have ultimate power over you. If you can fail publicly and recover privately, public opinion cannot devastate you. Competence in multiple domains, professional skills, financial management, emotional regulation, physical fitness, social connection, creates resilience. Each skill is another column supporting your internal structure. Remove one, and the building still stands. Machiavelli advised that a prince should always be studying war, even in peacetime, so that in adversity he would be prepared. When the market crashed and he did lose most of his wealth, the blow was real but not devastating. He had rehearsed this moment hundreds of times. He knew he could survive it because he had, in a sense, already survived it. He had destroyed the part of himself that needed wealth to feel whole. Machiavelli's guide to emotional control ultimately rests on a simple foundation. Your weak self is a liability that others will exploit, that circumstances will batter, that life will eventually destroy. Your strong self is an asset that can't be taken, can't be broken, can't be diminished by anything external. Every day you choose which self to feed. Every interaction is an opportunity to practice strength or rehearse weakness. Every setback is a chance to demonstrate resilience or confirm fragility. The man who destroys his weak self doesn't become invulnerable to all harm. He becomes vulnerable only to things worth being vulnerable to. Genuine love, authentic purpose, real growth. He becomes invulnerable to the thousands of petty weapons wielded daily: criticism, rejection, judgment, opinion, circumstances beyond his control. These weapons still fly, but they find no purchase because the target they seek, the weak self that needs external validation, no longer exists. In his farmhouse exile, Machiavelli wrote some of history's most influential words precisely because he had been stripped of everything that usually makes words powerful: position, audience, influence, resources. All he had was his mind, his experience, and his refusal to let external devastation create internal defeat. He transformed his greatest loss into his greatest legacy by destroying the part of himself that needed current success to continue working. 5 centuries later, his words remain because they came from genuine strength, not performed strength. They came from a man who had been broken externally and rebuilt himself internally. They came from someone who had discovered what very few discover: that the ultimate power isn't controlling others or circumstances, but controlling yourself. This is the art of not caring. Caring deeply about your character while being detached from your circumstances. Caring intensely about your purpose while being indifferent to others' opinions about it. Caring genuinely about others while not needing anything from them to feel whole. It's not the absence of care, but the presence of discernment about what deserves your care. Every morning you wake with a choice. You can spend the day as a hostage to others' opinions, to circumstances, to your own weaknesses, or you can spend it as a free person, directing your attention deliberately, choosing your responses consciously, building something that can't be taken. The weak self wants you to wait until conditions are perfect, until you feel ready, until others approve. The strong self knows that waiting is just another form of bondage. The destruction of your weak self begins with a single decision. From this moment forward, I will not allow my internal state to be determined by external conditions. Things will still hurt. Losses will still sting. Criticism will still register. But none of it will define me, control me, or devastate me. I am the awareness behind the experiences, not the experiences themselves. I am the sky, not the weather. Make the decision. Begin the practice. Destroy what makes you weak. Build what makes you strong. The world will test you daily. Most people fail the test daily, handing over their peace to whoever or whatever demands it. You can be different. You can be free. You can be the man or woman who cannot be destroyed by others because you've already destroyed everything in yourself that others could use against you. This is Machiavelli's gift, refined through centuries and applicable to every human life. Your weak self is not your real self. It's a construction. And like all constructions, it can be deconstructed. Beneath it lies something far more durable, far more powerful, far more truly you. That self doesn't need approval to act, doesn't need certainty to proceed, doesn't need others' permission to exist. The art of not caring is really the art of caring about the right things. Care about your character. Care about your competence. Care about your purpose. Care about genuine connection. But stop caring about the thousands of irrelevant opinions, the countless uncontrollable circumstances, the endless stream of external validation that you were never meant to need. You are enough, exactly as you are, to handle whatever comes. Not because you're perfect or invulnerable, but because perfection and invulnerability aren't required. What's required is the courage to destroy what makes you weak and the discipline to build what makes you strong. Everything else is just practice. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others because there's nothing left for them to destroy. They can take his possessions, his position, his reputation. These are all external and therefore temporary. But they cannot take his character, his competence, or his choice. These are internal and therefore eternal. This is not a philosophical abstraction, but a practical reality, available to anyone willing to do the work. The work is simple, but not easy. Every day, in every interaction, in every challenge, ask yourself, am I responding from my weak self or my strong self? Am I reacting from need or choosing from strength? Am I being controlled by circumstances, or am I controlling my response to circumstances? The answers to these questions, accumulated over days and weeks and months and years, determine everything. They determine whether you live as a hostage or as a free person. They determine whether external events devastate you or merely inform you. They determine whether you reach the end of your life having been pushed around by every breeze or having stood firm through every storm. Machiavelli's greatest insight wasn't about political power, but about personal power. The only power that matters is the power over yourself. Master that and you cannot be mastered. Destroy your weakness and you cannot be destroyed. Build your strength and nothing can diminish you. The choice has always been yours. It remains yours now. The weak self whispers that it's too hard, too late, too impossible. The strong self knows that the work begins exactly where you are, exactly when you decide. Choose strength, destroy weakness. Live, free. This is the art of not caring. Caring so much about who you really are that nothing anyone else thinks can shake it. Caring so much about what you're building that no obstacle can stop it. Caring so much about how you respond that no circumstance can control it. The man who achieves this is not cold or unfeeling. He is warmer and more feeling than most because he's free to feel without being controlled by feelings. He's free to love without needing love. He's free to succeed without requiring success. He's free to live without fearing death. This freedom, this invincibility, this mastery, it's available to you. It's always been available. The only question is whether you'll destroy what prevents you from claiming it. Destroy your weak self. Build your strong self. Live as the invincible being you are always meant to be. Not invincible to all harm, but invincible to the harms that destroy most people. The need for approval, the fear of judgment, the requirement for certainty, the dependency on circumstances. This is the path. This is the practice. This is the art, not of not caring, but of caring rightly, strongly, freely. The rest is just details, and the details will take care of themselves when the foundation is solid. You already know what needs to be destroyed. You already know what needs to be built. The knowing has never been the problem. The doing has always been the solution. Begin now. Begin today. Begin with the next decision, the next response, the next choice between weakness and strength. The weak self dies hard, but it dies. The strong self builds slowly, but it builds. The invincible life begins not someday, but this moment. Not somewhere, but exactly where you stand. This is Machiavelli's final lesson. You already have everything you need. You've always had it. Now, use it.